Hi there everyone, it's Jaycee. Welcome back to a new year of crafting. This card making tutorial focuses on the new Stencil Art Bi-Monthly Subscription plan. Let's make a 2-for-1 card inspired by lucky red envelopes for the Lunar New Year. Before we get into today's project, make sure you subscribe to the Altenew channel for more card making and paper crafting tutorials. My Perfect Pairings with Jaycee series explores crafting techniques that effortlessly blend sure-to-love new releases and well-loved Altenew favorites. If you love these kinds of crafty tutorials, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of my videos airing on the 2nd and 4th Sunday. The Stencil Art Bi-Monthly Subscription is making its big debut this year. For January 2024, Altenew has released Playful Watercolor Flowers. This large floral image extends past a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card front and is sure to make a bold statement on any card. This set contains 5 layers for the large bouquet and an additional stencil for a smaller motif. We will use all 6 stencils on today's projects. I'm starting with a 7 1/2 inch square panel of white cardstock, and I'm placing that panel on top of the flat side of the sticky mat grid. This panel can be cut apart to fit 2 mini Slimline card fronts measuring 3 1/2 by 6 inches. For me, it's easier to start with the number 2 stencil, which contains the majority of the foliage layers. This way I know where to center my stencil on the 7 1/2 inch square white cardstock and experiment with different arrangements. I'm using satin masking tape to temporarily adhere the stencil to the white cardstock panel. For the leaf and stem layers, I'm using Forest Trail fresh dye inks to color the images. On the number 2 stencil, I'm creating a gradient of aloe vera and matcha tea. Then I'll use oolong tea from the Wood Warbler fresh dye ink to color the center image. On the number 3 stencil, I'll fill in the detail leaf layers with swamp green. Then fill in the detail flower center with green gold. On the number 4 stencil, I'll create a darker leaf arrangement by starting with matcha tea, then deepening the layer with swamp green gradient. Then on the final detail layer, I'll fill in the leaves with oak moss. By the way, I'm using the mini ink blending tools to apply ink for all these layers. Now I'll return to the number 1 stencil to fill in the petal images. All of the petal layers are on this first stencil. Then by working in lightest to darkest value in the Rose Petal Fresh Dye Ink set, I'll apply light pink gradients. So I applied rose quartz on the base layer, puffy hearts on the second layer, and purple wine on the third layer. I deepened the more forward-facing bloom with a little bit of cosmic berry for a little contrast. Here's what the first 5 layers look like together. This arrangement is stunning on its own, but I do want to make 2 cards from this image. With a template mini slimline panel measuring 3 1/2 by 6 inches, I'm getting a rough idea of how I want to cut apart this image. I'll use a pencil to lightly trace a border around where I want the 7 1/2 inch square panel to be cut for 2 mini slimline cards. Then I can use this pencil guide to plan some filler images. The number 6 stencil in Playful Watercolor Flowers contains smaller buds and flower clusters to easily fill in the rest of the 2 mini slimline panels. And I'm coloring them with the mini blending brush tools and the same inks as earlier for a cohesive palette. This next step is all in the details. You can certainly leave your panels white, but to stay true to the red envelope inspiration, I'm going to color around the stenciled images with an alcohol marker. I'm using the Red Cosmos Ruby Red alcohol marker to trace around and fill in the white cardstock. I'll go slightly past my penciled guide from earlier just to overcompensate for cutting. It may look like a daunting task, but in the end I was thrilled with the result, and all I needed was a little music and about 30 minutes of tracing to get the job done. So once I've traced and filled around the stenciled image, I'll cut the panel apart into 2 mini slimline card fronts. Sometimes you have to trust the process and stick to the inspiration and the end goal. Now, I know for me I was skeptical of my bumpy lines and imperfect tracing in some smaller areas. I wanted to add some gold highlight details to these 2 stenciled images, so with the metallic watercolor pan set and gold pearl, I created some loose outlines with a fine water brush. I added quick veins and outlined some petals to effectively hide the irregular tracing and add a metallic detail around both card fronts. The key is consistency, this way these details look intentional. With the remaining metallic watercolor, I added some coordinating gold splatter. Now, 1 card panel at a time, I'll pair this background with some other Altenew well-loved must-haves. First up is Sketched Florals Stamp and Die Set. I'm using a few of the solid and outline images to gold heat emboss some filler images around the card fronts. Again, the consistent coverage adds a beautiful gold detail that nicely fills in the slimline panel. After all, you have a slightly smaller space to create a big impact than an A2 sized card. Another great pairing to the Playful watercolor flowers background is the Pen Sketched Flowers Stamp and Die Set. I gold heat embossed a few outlines and die cut them to fill in the open spaces of the card front. I used a coordinating red cardstock as my base to match the ruby red alcohol marker used earlier to trace around the stenciled images. I white heat embossed the thoughtful sentiment onto the same red cardstock. But before adhering that banner to this card front, I applied an array of white splatter to accentuate the introduction of the white sentiment. You'll most likely need to make a mini slimline card base to adhere these mini slimline panels. To do so, you'll need a panel cut to 7 by 6 inches. Then you can score the 7-inch long side at 3.5 inches for the perfect card base. And after adhering the mini slimline card front to your newly folded card base, that finishes your 2 stenciled art cards inspired by Lunar New Year red envelopes. My series encourages you to shop your existing Altenew stash and rekindle their love with newer releases. Perfect Pairings with Jaycee airs on the Altenew channel every 2nd and 4th Sunday of the month. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for tuning in to this Perfect Pairing episode with me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hello there! Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye!